All right. So yesterday we discussed a little bit about property, plant, and equipment. Let's go into further detail. And I'm telling you again, uh, property, plant, equipment itself is a very detailed topic. Ji Yusuf, alaikum assalam. We just need to keep it to the point where it is needed as per the learning outcome statements, as per the syllabus. So keep your boundary very clear right in front of your eyes so you know what exactly do we need to do. Just a little bit of it. I think we're going to start from the very beginning, property plant. This is the very first slide. That's what we did yesterday, investment in debt security. So we just discussed a little bit about it. Let's go into detail. Property, plant, and equipment. What does it mean? Property, plant, and equipment means the fixed assets which we use either for our administrative purposes or we use them for the purpose of production of supply and goods and services. Maybe we have our production plant and we use that plant to produce further goods and services, right? So a fixed asset, that is a tangible property which you can touch. It is used for production purposes, or maybe we have bought it for the purpose of rent, or we use it for administrative purposes. And we know property, plant, and equipment, non-current assets, also called the long-lived assets in the US, they last for more than a year, sometimes up to 20 years, sometimes up to 30 years, right? So just there's a question specifically to this point. Let me take you to that point specifically so we do the questions right where they are needed. Just as we do a specific part to it, we will touch upon some questions, and it was question number 6. Right here. Which of the following characteristics is not required for an asset to be properly described as a property, plant, and equipment? Property, plant. Remember, this is called the question twister. It will totally turn the question around, right? So make sure on your exam, on your Prometric exam center, when you're writing the exam, you have the facility that you can highlight a certain part. When you select a certain text, a certain small pull down menu will appear right here. And just by clicking here, the word highlight, you can just highlight a specific part which you will always want to be mindful, what exactly are we required to do. So that is very important. So here we have to be very careful. We need to select that is not required for an asset to be classified as a property, plant, and equipment. Held for use and not for investment. Yes, you have held for use, maybe for administrative purpose, maybe for production of further goods and services. Expected life is more than 1 year. Yes, and it is tangible property. We have a separate section of intangible assets. We'll discuss in detail the goodwill, patents, intangible with indefinite life. All this, inshallah, we'll discuss in detail. So this is not a classification. Whether the asset is newly purchased or not, this is not one of those characteristics that we require before we decide whether it's a property, plant, equipment or not. So this is the right answer, B. Absolutely, Talha, you got it right. Next. Okay, now, how do we initially measure an asset? When we acquire an asset, what specific amounts are considered? Initially, when you acquire an asset, you need to report it at its original historical cost, the amount you paid. But this is not as simple as it looks. There are many other costs, incidental costs, that have to be and that are necessary to bring the asset to their present condition and location. For example, if you purchase a plant from China, for example, the amount you paid, let's say $100,000, that's the invoice price. You may have to pay certain freight charges to bring it to Pakistan. Then you may have to pay certain custom duties because it's an importation. All the costs, custom duties, freight, when you bring the plant, you may have to prepare the site to install the plant. So site preparation, maybe you will have to hire a Chinese who will do the installation, all the testing. So all the cost, purchase, site preparation, custom duties, installation and testing, all the cost till the plant is in the working form. It starts for its intended purpose. All the cost will be added to the cost of the asset. This is how we initially measure a property, plant and equipment, all the costs that are incidental to bring that asset to the condition and location necessary for its intended use. So let us discuss briefly what exactly is included. As I said, that net purchase price, the price less any trade discounts or any rebates, plus you may have to pay purchase taxes or import duties, plus freights, and it also includes the site preparation, I think marked right here, site preparation, delivery and handling, installation, architects and engineer fee who will be involved in installation, plus the cost of assembly and testing. Finally, when it starts working, all the costs up to that particular point are capitalized, and that's how we initially record an asset on our income statement, on our records. Zai says, what about license fee paid to operate commercial property? Regarding property, we have a separate slide just at the end of the lecture. I will explain how we treat the investment property, how does GAAP treats it, how IFRS treats. We'll discuss it just as we go along. So I've kept it there, don't worry. All right, so let's see what are the specific questions related to this area. I think it was 3 and 11. Question 3 and 11. So investment property is coming. Just wait for the right time. All right, question number 3 and question number 11. Now, this is a good one. Import duties are considered as a part of purchase price. Import duties or import taxes. Subhan, that was clearly mentioned here. Purchase taxes or import duties, they are included as a part of the purchase price, not deducted. Please do not consider this minus. All are not being deducted. Minus trade discounts and rebates, plus purchase taxes and imports. They are added, not deducted. Why would you deduct that? You are paying to acquire that property. Why would you deduct that? It's added. Import taxes are added. All right. Now, this is a good question. The board of directors of a corporation authorize the president of the corporation to pay as much as $90,000, all right, to purchase a tract of land adjacent to the main factory. So the board of directors authorized a certain person to buy $90,000 worth of property, and this property is adjacent to the main factory. The president negotiated a price of $75,800 for the land. Okay, let's mark this. And legal fee for closing cost $820. This is the cost whenever you purchase some property, especially land or building. There are certain legal costs involved in this transaction which you may have to pay, maybe to the lawyer or someone who is involved in this transfer of legal title. A contractor cleared, filled, and graded the land for $6,800, all right, and dug the foundation for the new building, and this cost $4,300. Fine. The prefabricated building was erected at a cost of $181. The building has an estimated useful life of 20 years with no residual value. The contractor's bill indicated that the cost of parking lot and driveways will be $70-60. The parking lot and driveways will need to be replaced in 15 years. All that fine, fully marked. What exactly are we looking for? The proper amount to be recorded in the corporation's land account. Only land. Only land. So it will involve the purchase price. It will involve, or it should include, the legal cost relating to transfer of the title, and it should include the cost for clearing and filling the land, right? So these three costs must be added, and they must represent the cost of land. All the costs that we have given down, they are for the purpose of building. 4,300, building erection, 181, all this relates to the building part. So when we need just land, you just need to add up all these. So if you do, Fahad says B, and it has to be B for sure. Now there is one fine point I would like to make here. This is the cost that we have paid. Let's say when the land was cleared, there was certain quantity of timber which was sold for $2,000. So that amount must be deducted from the cost of acquisition. So the cost of land that you need to book is going to be $81,420. So that was the fine point you need to remember, that if the land is being booked, if any amount is collected against selling of some timber or some material that was acquired from clearing the land, it has to be deducted from the purchase price or from the overall cost, right? So that makes 83,420 to be the correct option. Yes, Subhan, scrap वगैरह उसको आप less करेंगे उसकी cost से. I think the next question was question number 6. or was it? Question 11. Here it is. Question number 11. An entity installed an assembly line in year 1, 4 years later. No, 11 shouldn't be. I think this, that should be in capital and revenue. Okay, let us keep it for the other topic. This relates to the capital and revenue expenditure. It shouldn't be here. It shouldn't be here. 3 and 11. 11 wasn't supposed to be here. Okay, now we got the idea that the initial cost, the value at which we'll record the asset, it should include the net purchase price excluding trade discount plus any purchase taxes, import duties, and all the costs that are necessary to bring the asset to its present condition and location that is necessary to make it work for its intended use. Right. Now, one important point here to be noted. What about the borrowing cost? Let's say if a company is constructing an extension to the existing building, right? And if the building cost is funded through a loan, what do we do with the interest, or what do we do with the borrowing cost? Now, listen. The standard regarding US GAAP, we are specifically focusing US GAAP. You might find many differences between the US GAAP and IFRS. And we just have to know about 8 to 10 differences, not more, because our focus is specifically on the US GAAP. It says that if the asset is being constructed, acquired, then for the period for which it was in construction phase, like for example, we started construction on 1st of January 2021, and we ended on 30th of September 2021. So all the interest costs during the construction phase, this interest cost or the borrowing cost can be added to the cost of building that you are constructing. So the borrowing cost can be added only from the point where the construction started till it was completed, not after that. We have a question. So I found in a company that the scrap sale has been recorded as a miscellaneous income. It can be done. Scrap sales related to production is right. You can treat it as a miscellaneous income. I'm talking about a land that you acquired. It had many trees that had to be cut off to level it off. And when the timber acquired because of cutting was sold, then that is deducted from the cost of the land. Scrap you're talking about is different. That is related to production, not the acquisition of land or any property. Right? So Zahid says if land is to be prepared for building and land is not leveled, then leveling, rocking, cutting cost will be absorbed by the land cost. Absolutely, Zahid, you got it right. You got it absolutely right. So we have 2 questions related to this specific information. That is question number 10. The type of assets that qualify for interest capitalization. When you can capitalize the borrowing cost. First, the assets that are being used in the earning activities of the reporting entity. Assets are being used. It means they are already ready to be used. They are not in the construction phase. No. Assets that are ready for their intended use in the activities of the reporting entity. We have just discussed that the asset must be in the construction phase, not ready to use. Assets are being constructed for the reporting entity's own use. So during that time, any interest paid must be or can be capitalized to the cost of the asset. So that makes C to be the correct option. Talha, you're absolutely right. Inventories that are manufactured in large quantities on continuing basis. Inventories that you intend to sell. We are talking about the assets that are intended to be used by the business. So that makes C to be the correct option. And I guess next question that we're supposed to do is question number 12. Okay, this one. All the costs related to constructing an asset, like you have your own employees, and instead of those employees working their regular tasks, those employees are involved in construction. Many maintenance staff in the factory, normally they are employed for construction purpose. The cost you pay to them, Talha, the cost you pay to your own workers while they were working during construction will be capitalized. It's a directly attributable cost that can be traced to that particular asset that is being constructed. Cost will be capitalized, right? Zahid, inventory is inventory is for the purpose of sale. It is not intended for the business on use. It is for sale. So we are talking about for an asset that will be held by the business for its intended use. Just read this information carefully. See, for internal use. So you do not construct the inventory for your own use. You build them to sell. All right. Next question is, a theme park purchased new exciting ride and financed it through a manufacturer. Means it was taken on the loan basis. So these are the specific costs: purchase price, delivery cost, installation, cost of trial runs, and interest charge for the first year. Now, this is an interesting question. The straight line method is to be used. We'll discuss this. Compute the depreciation on the equipment for the first year, assuming an estimated service life of 5 years. Now, we know what to do. All must be added. This. We are a little uncertain regarding this last interest charge for the first year. Remember, it says that interest charge for the first year, it means at some point in time, the ride would have been constructed fully. And from that point onward till the end of the first year, let's say the ride was constructed on 1st of January 2021, and the interest charge for the period from 1st January 2021 to 31st of December 2021. This period involves when the ride was ready. So this cost cannot be capitalized because the first year of use means it's already completed. So we cannot capitalize. Only the items that can be capitalized are the above 4 items that are highlighted. So it's going to be 800 plus 50 plus 70 plus 40. It's 960. And we know what to do. If there is no scrap value or salvage value is given, you're going to divide this amount with the estimated life. And that's going to be C, correct. So C is the right answer, 192. Right. So going back to our main slide. Now, moving on forward. Now, next is the subsequent measurement after the initial recognition. You initially recognize an asset for, let's say, $960,000. This is your initial recognition. How do we go for the subsequent measurement? 960 is not a static amount. It will change with the passage of time. The asset loses its value. This is what we call depreciation. So asset will get impaired because of some physical damage or maybe because of some changes in market conditions. So which means this 960,000 is the original historical cost, but subsequently there might be some impairments which we will discuss in our unit 4 later, not now. Impairment on long-lived asset is a separate topic discussed in a separate unit, and the accumulated depreciation, that is the reduction in the value of this asset. So historical cost is 960 less any impairment less the total depreciation charge so far. So if you deduct these two things from the original historical cost, the amount you get is called the carrying amount, the carrying value, or sometimes it is called the net book value. Carrying value or the net book value. This is how we subsequently report our assets once they have been acquired. Now, certain costs that we might incur after the acquisition, what do we do with those costs? Those costs can be either the capital cost, capitalizable cost, or they can be the revenue. I'm sure this is done in a very basic accounting course, capital expenditure and revenue expenditure. I'm very sure all of you know that. This is a very simple thing. Capital expenditures are those expenditures when we spend such a money on any asset, the asset's useful life may be extended. The asset might be able to produce more output, means it's become more efficient. Right? If this happens, or the asset becomes better than the previous state, it changes into a new one, like you replace your current engine with a NOS-based engine, which is very efficient, very fast, not a fuel efficient, means it works very at a high speed. Or restoration, you acquired an old asset, or the asset is now older, so you just restore it to its original form. So such costs incurred to extend the life, increase the efficiency of the asset for its betterment, for its adaptation, or for its restoration. Such costs are added to the cost of the asset. Such expenses are called the capital expenditures. They are added to the original cost of the asset and not expensed. Then what do we expense? We expense those items that are not expected to benefit the future period. Efficiency will give you benefit. Extended useful life will give you the benefit. Betterment, adaptation, all will benefit in the future. But revenue expenditures are those expenses which are not expected to benefit in the future. They are routine minor expenditures. Like when you acquire a car, the fuel cost is a revenue expenditure. The maintenance, the regular maintenance money you spend is a revenue expenditure, right? So such money spent are charged against the income statement, right? So let's do a few questions to explain the idea. Question number 9 and 11. And I believe they are right here, 9 and 11. Oh, this is a fantastic question. Please be with me, gentlemen. It's little sizable, more verbosity, but it's a wonderful question. Please be with me. An entity has owned its present facilities since 1981. The CEO has authorized various expenditures. Some of them will be capital, some will be revenue, to repair and improve the building during the current year. The building was beginning to sag. It was bending. Maybe the foundations were not strong, so it's beginning to sag, just like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. The building was beginning to sag, and without repairs, the building would only last another 8 years. To correct the problem, the foundation was reinforced and several columns were added. Hamad, this is not an exam type question. Your examiner is a dangerous guy, but he's also considerate that you have to do this question in about 1.5 minutes. So this is for the sake of practice. GLIME is lovely because he forces upon you the questions that are daunting, that are frightening. So embrace GLIME. He will help you get through the exam. So I prefer GLIME because most of the trainers run away from GLIME because it's too complex. Questions are sometimes more than what you require than the exam standard. But doing GLIME makes you so strong. When you go for the exam, you will find the exam questions to be manageable. You find them easier. That's the benefit of doing GLIME. So several columns were added in the basement area at a cost of 47,200. Okay. As a result, engineers estimate that the building will have a remaining life of 20 years. So we know for sure this expenditure has extended the life of the building, so it must be capitalized for sure. There is no any counter argument. To install new computer local area network LAN and be ready for the next generation of computers, the phone lines and electrical systems were updated at a cost of 81,300. The entity engineers estimate that these improvements should last 25 years. It's a long period of time, so it has to be a capital expenditure. The offices and open workspaces were rearranged to reduce. So I'm going to mark this one as well. 25 years. You can't expect this to be a revenue expenditure because we believe revenue expenditures do not provide benefit in the future, but it will. So it's going to be a capital expenditure. Then the offices and the open workspaces were rearranged to reduce exposure to electronic emission at a material cost of 31,000. This was done, reconfiguration of your arrangement so that the employees working, they could be safe from the harmful electromagnetic radiations that these electrical devices emit. So what do you think is going to be? This is clearly for the purpose of protecting your employees, and it's a massive expense and it will last for longer period. So it should be considered as a capital expenditure, even the information is little vague. The purchase and installation of the computers and software for LAN cost 1 or 2,700. The LAN hardware and software will have to be replaced in 6 years, but further rearrangements of the offices and workspaces will not be necessary. Now, this is quite a sizable spending, and it will last for 5 years or 6 years for this LAN and the software installation. So this will be a capital expenditure, without doubt. Then, after the above improvement were completed, the entire building was painted inside and outside at a cost of 9450. Had it been a brand new building which required painting, that painting would have been considered as a capital expenditure. Since this building is old and it's sagging, it's old, it's getting a little twisted out of orientation. So this is an old building and you are repainting this. So this cost, the last one, this is not a capital expenditure. It's not a new building. It's just repainting cost. It's redoing the same work that was done previously. So this would be considered as a revenue, more or less like maintenance expenditure. So if you go for the requirement and go through these requirements and tell me what do you think should be the right answer? Yes, Fahad, new building, first time painting, that's the capital expenditure. So which of these four options do you think is the right answer? Treat all expenses in the current year except cost of rearrangement, which should be amortized over a period of 20 years. No such time frame was given, and not all expenses are to be capitalized. All of you are going for D. Capitalize all costs with exception of painting because it represents maintenance expense. Correct. That is the right answer. Moving on to question number 11. An entity installed an assembly line in year 1. 4 years later, $100,000 was invested to automate the line. Automate, gentlemen, automation means efficiency, productivity. Since automation will result in productivity, that is the prime reason why do we go for automation. So the automation increased the market value and the productive capacity of the assembly line, but did not affect the useful life. Despite that, if it has increased the productive capacity, if no extension in life, still it will be considered as a capital expenditure. So what we are going to do, proper accounting treatment for this cost of automation. Report is an expense? No. Establish a separate account for $100,000. It's not a separate asset, rather it is the improvement in the existing asset. Incorrect. Allocate the cost of automation between asset and accumulate. This is clearly an inappropriate response. Debit the cost to the property, plant and equipment. That's right. So you will have to debit the cost of this expense to the cost of the asset. So that makes D to be the correct option. All right. So next area, I'm sure all of you are familiar. Subhan says, sir, can't we take the paint to the new building as a revenue expenditure? Kyun bhai? Nahi building, it is just been constructed and maafi painting, no painting, abhi just it has been plastered. It requires painting. So the very first time it's painted, it is capital. The regular maintenance expense is capital, is the considered as, yes, it's repaint. It's a repaint. Yes, it's a repainting. It's not the new building. Next is depreciation. Depreciation, I'm sure all of you know, depreciation is the systematic allocating the cost of an asset over its estimated life. If you have an asset and that asset will last for 10 years, so instead of just keeping that asset in the books and writing it off at 0 in the 10th year, this is extremely disturbing treatment of an asset. So instead of just booking an asset at the start of its life and doing nothing and writing it off as a loss at the 10th year, this will burden the 10th year's revenue and there will be maybe a loss. So what accountants do, and they would do it rightfully, they allocate the cost of the asset over its estimated life. Rather than just charging 1 million loss in the 10th year, why just you don't split the cost over the period of 10 years so that the cost can be systematically allocated? That's what you call depreciation. Depreciation is the systematic, rational allocation of the depreciable base over its estimated useful life. 5 years, 10 years, whatever the useful life is. Then what we do, we make this entry, we debit the depreciation expense. How do we calculate this depreciation expense? There are certain methods we will discuss in detail, and you credit the accumulated depreciation. This debit part, this goes to the income statement as an expense for the period, and this credit part gets accumulated every year into the accumulated depreciation account, and this is shown as a reduction from the cost. Let's say the asset has a cost of $1 million. Every year, the accumulated depreciation account keeps on increasing. So let's say in the first year, it was 50,000 is a deduction from the cost of the asset. Next year, 100,000, 150. So this accumulated depreciation amount, it will keep on accumulating, keep on increasing. And by the time the asset life is over, cost less accumulated depreciation, what you will get is the expected value at which we might sell it at the end of its life. That is called the residual value. We'll discuss that. So systematic allocation of the depreciable base of an asset over its estimated useful life, that's what you call depreciation. Now, what is depreciable base? Depreciable base is what you are going to lose from the new asset. Like this is it. Or she should be in the last slide somewhere. Okay, we can discuss this from this example. Jayhawk company recently acquired a robot to be, there's a question. First time cost of operating supplies and equipment necessary to operate the hotel, will it be capitalized? First time cost of operating supplies and equipment necessary to operate the hotel. Well, supplies are not an asset. Equipment, treat them separately, not as a part that is attached to the hotel. Equipment is a separate asset in its own right. Supplies like cleaning materials, like acids, or jhaadu and taki and poaching, you can't capitalize this in the cost of the asset, for God's sake. You can't do that. Treat every item separately. Equipment has to have its own existence. Something, what is it? Computer, fax machine, what is it? So you can't just merge it in the cost of the hotel. You can't. Kitchen equipment is a separate asset, Hamad. Kitchen equipment, cooking utensils, glass plating, they have their own existence. Treat them separately. Well, they may have their own justification, but what accounting sense tells us that these assets are to be kept separately in their own separate heads. Otherwise, treatment may vary. That's what my belief is. Jayhawk company recently acquired a robot to be used in its fully automated factory for the purchase price of $850. This is the purchase price. Jayhawk spent another $150 for installation and testing. That means the total amount should be $1 million. The company estimates that the robot will have a 5 years useful life, and after this, it will be sold for $100,000. So the purchase price plus installation and testing means $1 million. This is the original historical cost. Now, after its useful life, we may sell this asset for $100,000. This is called the salvage value, residual value. That's the value at which you may dispose of the asset when the estimated life is over, right? So this is called the depreciable base. The amount that we want to split, this is the amount we want to spread out over the estimated life of this asset, right? So remember, depreciable base is the original historical cost less any salvage value given here as $100,000. I'm going to write SV, or any impairment loss. What is impairment loss? We will discuss in a separate unit, not here. So this is what you call the depreciable base, and this is what we have to systematically allocate, right? Now, what depreciation method you will use? Depreciation method that you should use should be consistent or should reflect the pattern of in which the economic benefits from the asset are expected to be received. If you think that the asset will give more benefits in the early periods of its life, then you have a separate method. If you believe the asset will provide benefits uniformly over its life, you have a separate method. So you should use a method that should reflect the pattern in which the economic benefits are received. Whether you receive benefits, more benefits earlier, or do you receive the benefits uniformly? Now, there is a difference. IFRS has a little different opinion here. IFRS says, let me explain the idea. IFRS says that if an asset, like for example, if you have a plane, right? Plane is quite an expensive asset. It has very expensive jet engines. IFRS says that if there is a complete unit, a complete asset, but some parts of them are quite significant in amount, IFRS requires that the elements that are significant in that asset, they must be depreciated separately. Engines, the jet engines must be depreciated separately, and the body of the engine of the jet, the hull, the aluminum structure, it must be depreciated separately, right? So IFRS says that each part of an item with the significant value to the total asset, like jet engine, are very expensive. So jet engines must be depreciated separately, and the aluminum structure must be depreciated separately. But there is no such requirement in the US GAAP. So that was a slight point to be noted here, given I've extracted this from your GLIME textbook. So you just need to do up to this extent. And I'm telling you again and again and again, do not overdo. Your accounting that we do in ACCA and CA final, it's way ahead of the level of accounting you are doing in CMA. So please keep that in mind. Keep what is expected from you. Do not overdo things. Do not go for financial reporting from CA or ACC. Just keep within the boundary of GLIME, Hawk, or Wiley, whichever course provider you're using. Now we have different depreciation methods. Straight line method, usage-centric, accelerated depreciation method, group and composite. So let us discuss these as we go along. We have just agreed that the depreciation method that you should select should reflect the pattern in which the economic benefits are expected to be received, right? So there are different methods, and it's your choice which you think you find to be suitable in a particular circumstance for a certain asset. So let us discuss these methods: straight line, user-centered method, accelerated depreciation method, and group or composite depreciation method. Let us discuss them. So first we have a method which you are quite comfortable with. You might have read it in many places: straight line depreciation. Can we use different methods of depreciation for individual assets? Yes, you can. You have different groups of assets. Vehicles may be depreciated using the reducing balance method. Furniture are depreciated using the straight line method. So different class, you may have 8 or 9 different classes of assets, and they can be depreciated on different basis. Like loose tools are amortized in different way, revaluation method. So you can have different methods for different types of assets. So yes, that's right. So a straight line method, it is considered to be the simplest method. It is the easiest method in depreciation calculation. What we do, just taking on the example from the previous slide, and what was it? Look at this. This is the example we're going to extend in all the examples that follow. This is your historical cost, and the estimated salvage value or the residual value when the asset will complete its life, it's $900,000. So remember the historical cost and the estimated salvage value. So how do we calculate the depreciation, the expense to be charged in the periods to come? I said that straight line is the easiest method because you can simply calculate depreciation using straight formula: depreciable base, which is, what is depreciable base? Historical cost minus any impairment or residual value. Impairment loss I'm deliberately removed. So historical cost minus residual value divided by the estimated life. So if your historical cost is 1 million, residual value is $100,000. So deducting this, you'll get $900,000. $900,000 to be split equally over 5 years, and this will give you this format. So $900,000 divided by 5, your depreciation is same every year. Question: why salvage value is not considered in investment decision? Ross can say that because he has qualified he has qualified part 2 of his CMA. Ross, in salvage value in the investment decisions, remember, NPV and IRR decisions, they are made outside the accounting domain, right? NPV calculation is not mandated by IFRS or US GAAP. You do them in your own way. There are no specific rules to it. We don't follow the US GAAP or accrual-based accounting. I hope you remember that we use cash-based numbers for NPV calculation, right? So what we do in part 2 NPV calculation, simply take the cost and we spread it over its useful life, because we have to give the impact of any gain and loss at the terminal value of the asset. So for that purpose, we totally allocate the cost over the life of the asset, and any gain and loss on disposal when the life of the asset is over, that is treated for tax purpose. So there is a whole lot of theory behind that. So first, let us not bring it to it in this class, because the part 1 guys, they might get frustrated. If we use SI method of depreciation for plant in first year, we can change the method in second year. Absolutely, you can that. You can do that. You can do that. You can change if the new method you are adopting is more relevant. It will improve the presentation and will show the pattern of benefit in a more appropriate way. So yeah, it's changeable. It's not that once you selected one method and it is going to go forever. No, you can change that. You can change your inventory valuation method for LIFO, FIFO, weighted average, and so on and so forth. So this is it. Your depreciation charge every year is going to be the same. That's why it's called straight line method, sometimes called equal installment method, because the depreciation charge is same every year. So the entry you're going to make every year is going to be debit the depreciation expense, credit accumulated depreciation. Debit depreciation, credit accumulated depreciation. So this is the depreciation that is accumulating over the period. See, first year, second year, third year, fourth year. So by the time the 5 years period is over, how do you report the asset? $1 million, the cost of the asset, less the accumulated depreciation. So at the end of the life of the asset, what you have as a carrying value is the net book value of the asset, or which basically is the residual value, right? So straight line method is pretty straightforward, same charge every year. And by the time your depreciation is over, the closing balance in your asset account will represent the residual value. What if there is a fractional period charge, like we purchase an asset on 1st of October 2021 and we close our financials on 31st December 2021, right? So we have just used the asset for 3 months. So what you're going to do, you're going to calculate the depreciation for the whole year, which is 180, and we will take only 3 months out of 12 for this, which means $45,000. You have to be very careful, need to read the questions, information, because the policy related to depreciation is given. Mostly companies use no depreciation in the year of disposal and full depreciation in the year of purchase, even it might have been purchased part way through the year. Just like here, it was purchased on 1st of October, just 3 months before the year ending, but we will charge full year depreciation for this asset. This is called a policy mostly given in the questions, that full year depreciation in the year of purchase and no depreciation charge when you sell this asset off sometime in the future near the end of its life, right? So that's the idea. Keep it in mind. You need to be aware about the policy given in the question. Next method we have, as the name suggests, usage-centered activity method. Means the more you use, the more depreciation you will charge, right? In this, we have the units of output method. Let me explain this through formula. You have the depreciable base, $900,000. Same example we are using. Depreciable base is the original historical cost less residual value. So you take the depreciable base, you take the estimated total lifetime units that this item can produce, and whatever the number of units you produce in a particular year, just use this formula and you can calculate the depreciation for a particular year. There's a nice example given here, right here. On the day the purchase was made, Jayhawk anticipated that the robot would produce 8,000 units over the life of 5 years. So that's the denominator. 8,000 units would be produced. That's the total lifetime output. And the robot produced the following units during the period: 2,300, 2,000, this, and this, right? So what we're going to do, apply the formula. Depreciable base that we want to spread out over the life of the asset is $900,000. If I want to calculate the depreciation for 4th year, in the 4th year, you're going to replace units produced during 4th year, 1,200, depreciable base $900,000 divided by 8,000. This will give you the depreciation charge for the 4th year. Now, the point here to be noted, the year in which you use your asset more extensively, you will charge more depreciation. Like in the 1st year, we made extensive use of this asset. We produced 2,300 units, and resultantly, the charge is the highest. And in the year 5, we made the least use of the machine, and that's why we have the lowest depreciation. So this is called the usage-centered method. Depreciation is calculated based upon the usage. The more you use, the more depreciation you will charge. We have a question. Answer says actual or assumed production units. Yeah, these 8,000 units are estimated. You can produce more. Like I purchased a projector that was expected to last 200 hours of use, right? And I used it for more than 5,000 hours. See? So the estimated base could be the idea given by the engineering department, or it could be your own guess, or maybe it could be given by the manufacturer's specification. Like this 2,000 number, this was the number given by the manufacturer that this lamp will last 2,000. So this could be used as a base, or if you want to make a massive use, you can take any number you want. So it is mostly estimated. Answer, numerator has to be actual. For God's sake, whatever the actual units of number you produce, actual number of units, you put that in the numerator. Look at that formula. The formula says units actually produced during the current period. But here the denominator can be, of course, most certainly as an estimate. So moving on to the next method. Do we have some questions related to this? Yes, we do. We have some questions marked here as 14 and 15, and that will explain the idea of usage-centered methods. So it's right here. These are the same PDFs that have been shared with you guys. They have been separated unit-wise. 14, 15. Now, this is a beautiful question. Query, very practical. On January 1st, year 1, an entity purchased an abandoned quarry for $1.2 million to be used as a landfill to service its trash collection contracts with the nearby cities for the next 20 years. So you have purchased an abandoned quarry for 1.2 million, and it's hollow pit in the earth where you're going to dump garbage from across the city. All the city garbage will be dumped in this pit, in the quarry's pit. The entity depletes the quarry using the units of production method based upon the surveyor's measurement of volume of the quarry's pit. Surveyors say that the total pit's volume is 500,000 cubic yards, right? So 500,000 cubic yards, that is the volume that you can use. So you can collect garbage from all over the city and dump it, and this is the maximum size available as per the surveyor's estimation. Now, listen, how much you have paid? 1.2 million. Just do it in simplest way. That is the depreciable base, and there appears to be no residual value. Pit will have no residual value. So this is the depreciable base divided by the total size of the quarry. Now you simply replace here what is the cubic yard you used during the period, right? It says right here, this amount was 500,000 cubic yard when purchased, and now it is just 350. It means out of the 500 cubic yards, you have utilized 150,000 cubic yards of the pit volume. Now the question is, what is the net amount that should be shown on the entity's December 31st year 5 statement of financial position? Now, since you have utilized 150,000 cubic meter of the space, so this is what you will represent the depreciation. If you calculate this, it will give you the overall depreciation so far or depletion so far in this resource. So if I do, it's going to be 360. It means out of the 1.2 million worth of this query, I have utilized 360. So I don't need the accumulated depletion or accumulated depreciation. I need the net book value of the query. For that, I will have to take the original historical cost of the query, and from this deduct what we have used. What remains unused, that's what we need to find. So 1.2 million less this number gives you 840. So 840 is basically the number we will show on our financial statement as the net book value, also called the book value, also called the carrying amount or the carrying value, right? So that was a very nice application of usage-centered method. Next one, a new machine has an initial cost of $300,000, an estimated life of 2,000 hours. Interestingly, the same number that I was given when I purchased a projector, of use over a 3 years period. Number of years doesn't matter. This is the time that has been given. That will be used as a base. An estimated residual value of $70,000. Usage rates are estimated to be 500 hours in the first year, 700 hours in the second year, 800 hours in the third year. Depreciation expense in year 2 under the units of production method. We know we will take depreciable base multiplied by the hours used in year 3, which is 700, and divide it with the total hours that were expected to be used. How do we calculate depreciable base, gentlemen? Depreciable base is the original historical cost less salvage value, if any, or residual value. It is given $70,000, going to be 300 less 70, so that's going to be $230,000 multiplied by 700 divided by 2,000, and you should get your answer. And no one has responded yet. 230 times 700 upon 2,000 gives you 80,500. Fahad is absolutely right, 80,500. So that's the charge of depreciation in year 2. You can calculate for every year. Put 5 years, you will get the depreciation for the first year. Put 800, you will get the depreciation for the third year. So that's the usage-centered method. All right, moving on. Next, we have what you call the accelerated depreciation method. Accelerated depreciation method means you charge higher depreciation in the early years and lower depreciation charge in the later years of the life of the asset, right? And there are 2 methods to it. One is the declining balance method. Other is the sum of year digits method. These methods are called accelerated depreciation method because depreciation under these methods will be higher in the early periods and lower in the subsequent periods. So if you just look back, here the depreciation was entirely dependent upon the usage. So it was neither high nor lower, it was on usage. But on straight line method, what did you see? It was a straight number all the 5 years. But what you will see in the accelerated depreciation method, you will see the depreciation charge will be higher in the early periods and lower in the subsequent periods. So there are two methods in this declining balance method and the sum of year digits method. So let me explain these to you. First is the declining balance method. What you do in this method, you simply take the carrying amount, that is the book value shown in your books, and you multiply it with the percentage which will always be given to you. Or if it's not given, it can be calculated in a very simple way. So what you will do, you will calculate the depreciation expense by multiplying the book value with the percentage given. Like we are given a certain percentage, like 40%. Maybe in the next question is given 40%. So what you will do, you will take the carrying amount, multiply it with 40%. So the depreciation for the first year is 400,000. So 1 million less 400,000 depreciation, your net book value is 600,000. This 600,000 is the net book value, also called the carrying value. Next year, we are going to multiply 40% with this number. Depreciation falls to 240. Fahad, I need your special attention in this table. Here you have some issue, please. And this is the depreciation second year. So this becomes your book value at the end of second year. You use the same book value that was at the end of the last year and apply 40%. This is also called diminishing balance method. You're right. Or the reducing balance method, or the declining balance method. Now, what you're doing, you are charging same percentage on the carrying value. Since the carrying value is falling, that is why depreciation charge every year is falling from 400 to 240 to 144 to 86,400, and it is falling. That is why it's called the diminishing balance method, reducing balance method, or the declining balance method. Now, Fahad, the issue you had in the last year, we should charge 40% of 129,600. But if we do, the number of the amount that we get here will result in carrying value being less than $100,000. Our carrying value should be exactly $100,000 at the end of the life of the asset, because this is the residual value. So maybe you get a different number when you multiply 40% with 129,600. But here we have to just keep the balance so that have your carrying amount exactly equal to the scrap value or the salvage value. So that's why when you multiply 40% with this number, you won't get this. This is just the balancing amount. Fahad got the idea. This is the balancing amount so that your carrying amount becomes exactly $100,000 at the end of fifth year. So this is called the declining balance method. Now there's one important point you need to know. Sometimes in the question, you are required to calculate the depreciation using the double declining balance. Double declining balance method. Now, what is double declining? Let me show you with the help of an example, if I could find. Yes, it's in question number 4. Double declining method. Okay, this is question number 4, and it has the same method. We did double declining method, which is one of the methods we call the accelerated depreciation method. A corporation purchased manufacturing equipment for $100,000 with an estimated useful life of 10 years and a salvage value of 15,000. The second year's depreciation for this equipment using double declining balance method. We don't have any depreciation. What we do? So please listen. When it's written double declining balance method, what does it mean? You will have to calculate the depreciation percentage using the straight line method, which tells me that if the asset lasts for 10 years, which means every year depreciation will be 10%, 10%, 10% for the next 10 years, it will be exact 100%. So it means if the life of the asset is 10 years, we are going to charge 10% depreciation every year, just double that. And you get your depreciation percentage. That's what you call the double declining percentage. Calculate your depreciation percentage using the straight line method. Once you have the percentage, multiply it with 2. You get the percentage which you call the double. Let's say if the asset had a life of 5 years, what would it mean? That the life of 5 years means that every year we will charge depreciation of 20%, 20, 20, 20 for the next 5 years. So 20% multiplied by 2, 40% will be your double declining balance percentage. Right? So calculate the depreciation based upon straight line method and percentage, and that percentage must be doubled. So we are going to use here 20%. And we need to calculate the depreciation for the, let me just first, I have to calculate depreciation for the second year. So first year depreciation is going to be $100,000 times 20%, which is 20,000, right? So cost is $100,000, depreciation is 20. What is carrying value? 100,000 less 20. Carrying value next year will be 80. I will multiply 80,000 with 20%. So the next year two depreciation would be 16,000. If you ask me, we got the answer. But if you ask me what will be the depreciation in the third year, you're going to take the carrying value, deduct the current year depreciation from it. 80 less 16 will give you 64,000. So the third year depreciation is going to be 64,000, 20%. That's what you call carrying value or book value multiplied by the percentage given. And that will give you the depreciation you need to calculate. So that's C, and that's your right answer. We have any other question? No. Okay, so that's your declining balance method. What about the sum of year digits method? This is the last area here. And then we have, Zahid, your question regarding investment property. What we do under US GAAP and under IFRS, that is the last slides there. Under sum of year digits method, we use this formula, depreciable base, which is, of course, historical cost minus residual value or scrap value, multiplied by the remaining years in useful life, divided by the sum of all years in useful life. Formula might look a little confusing. We can do it straight away in the example. How do we apply the sum of year digits method? Look at this. If the asset is expected to last 5 years, we are just going to add the digits in the years. Year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you add all these, you will have 15 digits. Sum of the years digits. If the years digits are added, what you get? 15. Now, what is going to be the first year depreciation? First year depreciation will be 5 upon 15. Why 5 upon 15? Because remaining years in useful life are 5 and sum of all the years in useful life are 15. 5 by 15 multiplied by depreciable base, which is $900,000. What's going to be the next year depreciation? 4 upon 15 multiplied by the depreciation base. So you are going to multiply first year with 5 by 12, or 5 by 15, 4 by 15, 3 by 15, 2 by 15, and you see the depreciation charge is very high in the early period, and as we proceed, the depreciation amount become progressively smaller. So this is why you call these are the accelerated depreciation methods, because the depreciation charge keeps on falling every year, and whatever method you're using, your accumulated depreciation should be $900,000, and the end carrying amount, book value, must be the salvage value or the residual value that is given to you in the question. Hamad says, in that case, we will depreciate the asset in 5 years instead of 10 years. No. No, Hamad, no. This is not right. In double declining balance method, we simply use the percentage. The asset will still be depreciated over 10 years. It will still be depreciated over 10 years. We won't reduce its life. We can't. If the asset has a useful life of 10 years, by using double declining doesn't mean we are going to shorten its life. It's just that the percentage is doubled, 20%, and this percentage is applied all year from 1 till year 10. Hamad, did you get the idea? Suhan, absolutely right. In that case, you have to get rid of the asset as quickly as possible. So charge highest depreciation in the early period, because you know the asset might not be useful during the subsequent years of its life. So yes, you are right. So gentlemen, that was the sum of your digits method. Your digits are added and you apply this proportion every year, and depreciation becomes progressively smaller in the subsequent years. Now the last slide, and after that you have a little note on the investment property that Zahid asked a little while ago. Now, sometimes you have got so many assets that keeping separate account for each type of asset would become very difficult. So we have a separate treatment for such assets. It's called group or composite depreciation method. Group method and composite depreciation. When you say group method and we use straight line, what we do, we have dissimilar assets. Instead of depreciating every asset separately, we just combine them and make them group in the form of groups. So when we use the group method, in the group method, we combine all the assets that are similar. Please note this down. In group depreciation method, the similar assets are grouped, just like we have vehicles, furniture, computer equipment, fixtures, so on and so forth. So when similar assets are combined, this is called group depreciation. Some of them will have longer life, some of them will have absolutely pooling, and some of them will have longer life and some shorter. So just combining these will tend to average out all the assets we have. So it is not going to be very accurate, but it's going to save a lot of time, a lot of effort. But when we use the composite depreciation method, it is similar to the group method, but the difference is in composite depreciation method, we combine assets which are dissimilar. Since it is not cost effective for us to have separate groupings of the assets, we just combine them in 2 or 3 different groups, and these assets are dissimilar. Remember, in group depreciation, assets are similar, and we use the same rate for all. And in composite depreciation, the name itself suggests that the assets are dissimilar. We combine these assets, even they are dissimilar, we charge the same rate for all, and we depreciate all of them in the same period, assuming that they have the similar life, even they may not have. So this is just a small note. There is no question related to group or composite depreciation, just the note that you need to remember. So here was the last point here. You need to see the difference between the different types of assets depreciation in IFRS and US GAAP. Please remember, US GAAP only allows the cost method. Assets cannot be revalued under the US GAAP. Original historical cost needs to be systematically allocated over the useful life of the asset. But IFRS allows you either the cost model or the revaluation model, which means you can revalue your assets at any point in time. But the important note here is that if you want to revalue, like you have land, different types of plots of land you have across the country. So when you want to revalue land, all the constituents of the land account, land in location A, B, C, D, all must be revalued at the same time. All the assets in the same class must be revalued. You can't do cherry picking. You can't revalue land A and C and not B and D. You have to revalue them all. So the revaluation surplus on this land or this asset revaluation, it goes to revaluation surplus, which is shown as a part of other comprehensive income. There is no such revaluation model allowed under the US GAAP. Now, next question, Zahid, you asked regarding investment property. There is no investment property in the US GAAP. US GAAP provides you no classification of investment property. But IFRS does. IFRS allows that certain properties, which are for the rental purposes, they are treated under IS 40, International Accounting Standard 40. So we have 2 ways to treat such property investment. Either we go for cost method, just like we go for the long-lived assets, or we can use the fair value method. Under the fair value method, if your investment property has a value of $100,000 at the start of the year, 1st Jan 2021, by the end of the year, 31st December 2021, if the fair value has gone up to 112,000, this 12,000 increase in investment property, it is considered as an income in the income statement. Next year, if the value falls to $90,000, this investment property, which is land and building, of course, if the value falls to 90, then you're going to record $22,000 loss in the next year income statement, right? So you have 2 methods to follow. If you follow the cost method, in that case, you depreciate just like your normal assets. If you use the fair value method, this is not revaluation, this is fair value method, in which every year the assets is measured at the fair value, any gain and loss is reported in the income statement, and the investment property that is designated at fair value, it is not depreciated, and that ends your property, plant and equipment. Please, gentlemen, do not go beyond that. Do not try to be chartered accountants. You can't. Your accounting is only spread over these 6 units out of 20 units. So keep the boundary to that limit. Do not go beyond that. Do whatever the questions are there in Hogg, Lime, Wiley. Do not rush for anything else. Your accounting is limited. And I told you, there was no accounting in CMA from 2010 to 2014 December. No accounting at all. No IFRS, no GAAP, no balance sheet, no income statement. Can you believe that? So please keep your limitations, your boundaries in mind, and then prepare accordingly. Thank you for attending the class. I'll see you guys next week with the last topic, intangible assets, and inshallah we'll carry on. Thank you.